And yeah, I'm very excited and glad to introduce our guest today, which is Sister Tibebwa. She's a priestess, healer, tree planter, environmental, permaculture, and community activist. And with us today as well as Andy from our beloved Kernel community and Stuart, our Kernel. And yes, I'm not sure how we can start this conversation because since it's December new moon, I'm not sure, Sister, if you would want to start setting some intentions, or if you can do it a bit later and then dive into a conversation or what if prompt.
Greetings of love and light and peace and darkness, Kernel family and beyond. Oh, it's such an honor to be here with you today from Addis Ababa, from Ethiopia. So I'm giving thanks for the sunshine and for this new moon at a very auspicious time, which actually new moons are always the time for their fertile ground. So they're the time for setting intentions, and it's worth being aware of where we are in the moon cycle, because if you're not careful, if you weren't aware that today was a new moon and you were having thoughts or, you know, focusing on things that were maybe unaccomplishable or things that were, you know, anxious or frustrating, you would be planting more seeds of that for this next full moon. And so, yeah, it's really always a good idea to really be a little careful of what we focus on the days of the new moon. And in particular at this time, there's this really big kind of impetuous, like there's an abundance of confident energy, and the feeling that we can really move forward. But we're just being cautioned a little bit to also use rationality and logic a little bit, and look at all potentials and not be too overconfident, because there is a tendency towards rushing and making mistakes, or inviting in disappointments. So it's a lovely, you know, topic, because our topic is on balance, or for me is finding the balance. That's why I have focused on what are the energies within one being. And so where we get to what I call the divine feminine energy and the divine masculine energy. So it looks like the moon intentions for today aligned with the topic beautifully. So maybe we have our discussion, and then if there's time afterwards, and if anyone would like to, we could also do some intention setting and look further into what are the prospects of the new moon.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's like the reason why we actually time each of our what if conversations on the new moon for that very reason, actually, Sister, because it's like a time to open up your imagination and, you know, maybe be more open to new ideas and kind of really reflect. So it's actually, yeah, perfect. And this topic especially is perfect. Maybe I'll just introduce the question, and then I think, Sister, you can give some context and some background. So we've been talking to Sister for the last few weeks, trying to really think about, you know, how do we kind of the diversity within, I think, like when I first encountered Sister within Kernel, I was like so blown away by kind of your presence, but like your words and your thoughts. And I was really, even to be honest, like surprised. I was like, oh, I had no idea that Kernel kind of had this depth of different ways of approaching, you know, blockchain technology. And I think like we really wanted to kind of share that and kind of like dive into it deeper, and to hear like not only Sister's work, but kind of her philosophy and how she approaches her work. And so the question that we wanted to dive into today was, what if the existence of a divine feminine energy and her gifts was accepted and accepted and valued equally as the divine masculine energy and his gifts. And you know, it's a really deep question. Actually, it's interesting. I think we went back and forth a few times on how to really frame this question, but also how to bring it up in a way that was approachable. And I think it's important to note here that when we talk about words like masculine and feminine, I know, Sister, you're going to dive into this further. We're not really referring to gender in a physical sense, but you know, these are kind of terms that are quite ancient, and I think it's a great place, maybe as we kind of dive in, Sister, to maybe give some background on the energies, the Hermetic principles, and things like that, where these kind of derive from. So I'd love for you to kind of cover that.
Okay, so I mean, that's the most important to set in the container, is that, yeah, when we talk about masculine and feminine, or when I talk about masculine and feminine, I'm talking about energetics. These are archetypal energies that run on all planes, on all levels of creation. And it is, if you want to say, the interplay between those two, what some people might consider opposites or dualities, it's the interplay between the two that provides the spark of life, of creation. And so those energies are in all bodies. And so that's kind of the most clear thing that I wanted to set within the container, not referring to man or woman. It's referring to the energies that reside within all of life. There was an ancient archetypal energy that has manifested on Earth in many different physical forms, but the form I'm going to talk about in his Greek name was Hermes Trismegistus, otherwise known as, again in his Greek name, but in the Kemetic form, he was called Thoth, or in his Kemetic name, he was called Tahuti, which, if you want to say, was the god of wisdom in that lineage. And so Hermes Trismegistus, like I think it was 25,000 years ago, they talk about, left these 7 principles, 2 of which that I will refer today. Nirmala, maybe you can also post in the chat the 7 principles so that anyone who's interested can have a look. But the 2 that I particularly focus on today is the principle of polarity, which is that everything is dual in life and everything has poles. But what we would perceive as pairs of opposites, like and unlike, are actually the same in essence, just difference of degrees. And so what looks like a hot cup of tea and a cold cup of tea, it's still a cup of tea, but it's a difference of degrees. And so, you know, we tend to think of things in a linear fashion, where there's like love and hate, or, you know, good and bad, or, you know, man and woman, masculine, feminine, whatever. But actually, they're the same, where it's all the same in essence. It's just a difference of degrees, and that opposites, the poles actually meet. In the tantric world, we describe it that if you dive deeply into pain, you come back up in ecstasy, and if you dive deeply into ecstasy, you'll come into pain. So it's a circle rather than a line. And so the 7th principle, which is the principle of gender, is that gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles, and gender manifests on all planes of existence. And so when I realized that and started to study deeper, I realized that there's many different words used for these archetypal energies throughout all the different cultures and lineages and pathways. You know, Carl Jung, he refers to it as the anima and the animus. You know, throughout all of, you know, if you go back into most lineages, you're going to find a concept somewhere, often now deeply buried, of a feminine principle, if you want to say, or a feminine energy. There is, you know, many who would say that if you wanted to say the adoration or worship of that divine feminine or that feminine principle, was, carried out throughout our world for 50,000 years. It's only relatively recently that the concept or idea of a feminine energy or a feminine principle has been, persecuted and has unnecessarily been hidden. And it is my belief that when, as we are healing our earth and healing ourselves, that healing will come through finding the balance and restoring the balance of the masculine and feminine energies within all life, starting within ourselves. So I mean, we those of us who would like to study further into it, you'll see that deep within, as I say, most of the lineages, there's a hidden concept of the feminine. So apart from, let's say in Christianity, you have the concept of Mariamanna or Mary, the mother of Christ. And in a lot of Christian cultures, she's often revered equally, if not more, than the divine masculine principles. We have also in the lineage of Judaism, we have the concept of Ruach, which is the spirit, which is always referred to in the feminine, as of course is Sophia, the concept of wisdom. And again, in the Holy Bible, wisdom is always referred to as she. We also have in the ancient Solomonic temple, there was always two poles, two pillars, both for the masculine and the feminine. That concept is carried on in the tarot cards. You'll see there's the two pillars in black and white. And then in Islam, we have the concept of the hand of Fatima, which was Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was his daughter, and it was through her hand he was healed, and he was kept balanced, if you want to say. And so also in Arabic, the word for the soul is always in the feminine form. We have many other cultures that have a concept of divine pairing and of having morals, like, ancient myths taught about morals of life or how to deal with life, but taught through these divine pairs and how they interrelate and what happens to them and how they deal with their their lives or their existences. And so we can see that, as I say, apart from the ancient mother worship, if you want to say, there is still to this day remnants of this concept that there is actually these two energies at play, and how we interact, how those energies interact, where they meet, brings us this friction, and out of the energy of friction it comes the spark of creation. There is a theory that goes that there is the one, the higher consciousness. There is, if you want to say, the source, and that source is so unknowable that any time we try to put a word on it or a concept on it or a theory on it, we've already limited it. And it's kind of, I think in Buddhism, it's considered that there's just such, it's so unknowable that we can't know it, if you want to say. And so there's a theory that says that out of the one split and became the two, which is the masculine and feminine principles. And then out of the two, which is that friction or that meeting place, became many, because that's the spark of creation. So I would like to look a little bit, maybe we look a little bit about her gifts, because I did ask for that to be put in. Well, both of their gifts, because when we look at the two gifts, there's many gifts, and these are theories. Okay, I'm not saying that there is one truth. This is what I have downloaded and felt, but there is always many, many truths. But it is somehow a widespread theory that the gifts of the masculine, if you want to say that the responsibility or the work of the divine masculine in our world is to create safe, protected spaces. And if those safe, protected spaces are created, then the work of the divine feminine is to be able to be open, vulnerable, surrender, and be receptive. And then the divine feminine energy can receive directly cosmic consciousness and has the ability to then channel cosmic consciousness and lead our family, our human family, into healing and balance. However, to be open, vulnerable, and receptive, there has to be this container, this safe container, which is the realm of the divine masculine. And so the gift of the divine masculine is usually considered to be stillness, to be clarity, to be focus, to be discipline, and to be will. And the gifts of the divine feminine is considered to be openness, receptiveness, creativity, intuition, flexibility, and emotions. And so we say that the feminine energy in her texture or her, is magnetic. She's lunar and she flows inwards. So her focus is inwards. Whereas the texture of the masculine energy is electric, it's solar based, and it flows outwards. He flows outwards. So looking at I'm going to go through it quite quickly because it's quite deep, and each one of those concepts and each one of those theories I could go in. I have written a whole chapter in a book about this, so I will talk about that later. But if you want to say, there's the conscious self and the creative self. There is the I am, which is everything that we actively think, which is I am Sister Tibebwa, I am a priestess, I am right? That's me in my divine masculine. But now if I step into I feel, I'm in my divine feminine. And so those are the two essences. There's the conscious self, which is the divine masculine. There's the creative and communicative self, which is when we're in our divine feminine. Now, as I say, we have both of these energies running through us. We can choose to use our divine masculine energy or use our divine feminine energy. Obviously, in the world that we live in at this point, the divine masculine energy has been rewarded in us since we were children. And so we've learned to use the divine masculine energy a lot, whereas the divine feminine energy is often considered to be of lesser importance or almost dangerous, because the realm of the emotions or being emotional is considered to be weak. And often we spend a lot of our time trying not to feel anything, rather than to allow ourselves to dive deeply into the realm of emotions. The realm of rationality and logic is considered to be highly valuable compared to, well, actually, I just feel that this doesn't feel right, even though my logic is telling me everything looks fine. But if I go into my divine feminine and I think it just doesn't feel right, I see it in the numbers and in the presentation, but it doesn't feel like. But it's very difficult to speak like that in our corporate situations. Yet, if you ask most highly successful corporate bosses, what is their secret? They will tell you, I took all the advice and I considered every option, but I went on my hunch. and I follow my hunches. And so that is now the divine feminine. And so the role, as I say, we've the inward focus of the divine feminine actually allows us to be able to receive, and the outward focus of the divine masculine allows us to give. And if you look at the way that the divine masculine receives energy is by looking outwards, perceiving things from an eternal perspective, like working out what might happen. It's all the potentialities, looking at into the future, looking at what's the best scenario for everyone involved, for, you know, and looking at, I call it, so again, using the Kemetic archetypes, there's a Heru, what's he called in Greek? He's called Horus. So he's the hawk. And so it's like the divine masculine has this ability to fly over and see things from an eternal perspective with the eyes of a hawk. And when I'm in my divine masculine, I am like looking at, as I say, we look at it in terms of potentialities, looking at all possible potentialities of any one decision, and then looking for how can that be creating the best situation for all. And so in his outward focus, he's often looking for the best for everyone. And so, but that means that often we're looking in the future rather than just being in the present. And so now when we come into the I feel, or into the body or embodiment, she will always look for things right here and right now. She's not interested in the future. She's interested in right here, right now, and how do I feel? And so that's her ability then to be able to receive. We come into like, how do we access these two different energies? Although the divine masculine is stillness, he's actually activated or accessed through activity. And so to get in touch with his energies, often we have to move. We have to do things, we have to do, activities, sport, body movement, moving. And although the divine feminine is constant movement in her essence, because she's creativity herself, she's accessed through stillness. And so meditation, just being instead of doing, in rest, within the dream state, within stillness. Now, going with, like, if you wanted to say, the realm of pure thought is the masculine and the realm of the body is the feminine. So when we're looking at the sacred union, we're looking at the importance of uniting both of those energies. So although the realm of thought is considered to be much more important than the realm of the body these days, we actually have to begin to remember, or remember is a good word, because we always knew it, that there's wisdom in the body of equal importance to the wisdom of our thoughts. So I would like to look a little bit about, about how is that represented in different cultures. Is that so? Like, we have this amazing yin and yang from the Chinese culture, and so I really took a lot of time to try to focus on why is it's not just black and white in equal shape and size. It's actually got a dot. The black has got, the darkness has got a dot of light in it, and the light has a dot of dark in it. And so even within the divine masculine is a seed of the divine feminine, and even within the divine feminine is a seed of the divine masculine. And so that's where we get to, it's not just purely detached, rational, logical thinking. There is this, within it is this eternal need of the divine masculine to actually care and to actually provide safe, protected spaces, and look at how, when we're using his energy, how we can look at all potentialities and look at the best for all. And then within the divine feminine, we have this, one of her facets, like I look at each archetype, or each, if you want to say goddess, or myth, there's a different facet. So like when you cut a diamond, it's still one diamond, but each facet of the diamond gives it its sparkle. So there is a concept of the divine feminine represented in the Indian goddess Kali, or in the Kemetic goddess Sekhmet, who is a destroyer. And so it's not just this loving, receptive, open, vulnerable, divine feminine. There's also a seed within there of destruction and of fierceness and of the ability for a mother to defend her young or stand up against unrighteousness for the vulnerable. And so we have, again, these even within the archetypes, we already have duality. I also wanted to kind of highlight that a little bit. In the, it's generally accepted that there might be like a Mother Earth and a Father Sky. That the ether or the air is a masculine principle, and the earth is a feminine, or water is a feminine principle. But actually, when you study the Kemetic wisdom, you realize that in the ancient African tradition, it was actually Mother Sky. So her name is Nut, the goddess Nut, and you have Father Earth. So he's Father Gub. His Gub is the earth god. And so again, we see that within our human family, we've already recognized that there's both within everything. We have also the caduceus, which is an ancient Egyptian, well, it's basically the staff of Tahuti or Thoth, or our mistress Megustis, which has been taken over by the sign of the medical world. But that's been changed, because usually the medical sign has got one snake on it, whereas actually the original had two. Which was the lunar and the solar, which was the balance of the ascending and the descending. It coincides with the Ida and the Pingala of the Indian tradition, and it, when both are running equally, it allows for a clear channel for Kundalini or Umbelini or Sekma to flow clearly up and down our bodies and allow for instant access to cosmic consciousness. So another way of looking is the path of surrender, or the path of will, which is, I think, a Buddhist concept. Again, path of will would be using your abilities to to be aesthetic, fasting, long periods of prayer, and long periods of using your spirit or your will to overcome your flesh and receive direct communication with God, with divine masculine, or the path of surrender, where you totally just surrender and have faith that whatever happens is right, instead of trying to direct what happens. We also have the concept of movement, which is relaxation and contraction, which of course all the time our hearts and every single muscle in our body is using that concept of contraction and relaxation. Coming to that, I have found in my life that it's actually the meeting place of the divine masculine and divine feminine that I love to be. There are many who find, especially in relationship, that the best space is to be either ultra masculine or ultra feminine, because then in relationship, when you come together, you create a battery effect between the masculine and feminine. But I found that that didn't resonate so much for me as a celibate being, and that I wanted to honor all sides of me. And so I found that actually I love the edges. I love where two different energies meet, which is why I love the beaches, and I love to be beside lakes and then rivers, and I love where the tree line stops and the mountain starts, and I love where the two energy sources meet. So I try to spend my time surfing that wave. Now, it's not a point, it's not a line. I found it to be a wave between the two, and then I can intuit or feel when I need to step more into my masculine and get things done, or step into my feminine and just embody, spend more time focusing on my senses, focusing on my pleasure, focusing on cooperation and communication and coming together with other beautiful beings. Or I can step in more into my masculine and more detach myself from a situation and try to see it again from that eternal perspective, and really use my rational and my logic, and really see, is that the right thing to do right now? What would be the potentials of doing this action or not? And really looking at it from an eternal perspective. So I think I've talked about a whole lot. I don't know if anyone
that was
has
amazing.
any
I was
questions.
actually No, it was amazing. I was taking lots of notes, and that's great. And yeah, definitely, if anyone has any questions, Charles shared actually a really beautiful, I guess, like poem from Sun Ra, which really touches on this. And I'll just read a couple of lines, actually. And if anyone has any questions, please definitely feel free to ask. At first, nothing is, then nothing transforms itself to be air. Sometimes the air transforms itself to be water, and the water becomes rain and falls to earth. Then again, the air through friction becomes fire. So the nothing in the air and the water and the fire are really the same upon different degrees. And I feel like so many words in that actually really tie back to what you're saying, which is really amazing.
I love that quote. Thank you, Charles. I'm just going to copy that one.
Yeah, good one. And then I know, Fang, I think, yeah, you wanted to ask a question next, I think.
Yes, I think first, thank you for sharing so much. I've also kind of like been kind of like furiously taking notes in a sense. And I would love to, for you, sister, to also talk about your work in Lamu Island. And I like, from all the things that you've mentioned, it feels like a very nice balance between the divine masculine and the divine energy, that it is kind of like motivating or like prompting you forward to do the work that you're doing in Lamu Island. Potentially what you've mentioned of having the divine masculine, of like getting things done, and then really looking at the future, and then making sure that you look at all the potentials that are best for everyone, comes from your divine masculine energy. Whereas like the divine feminine of creativity, emotions, and openness, like prompted you in the first place to start that work in Lamu Island. And I would love for you to speak a little bit more about that.
Okay. I kind of thought about this when I thought it's very challenging for me to separate like my being and my work, because they're again somehow deeply connected. And so like there's the work of my being, And then there's the work that my being manifests in this earth. I use the word womanifest because manifest is somewhat a little bit biased, I think. And so, and I would also love to add that it's been my journey in kernel, which brought me into Web3, because I was an analog girl living in a digital world until I got scholarship to KB4. And so that's where it really took on a whole other realm, because of course Web3 is a ether. It's not tangible. It's not, if you want to say, on this earth, but it is of the earth. But it's of the air, or the aether, which is really the spirit. And so, of course, then we have Ethereum, which is built on the same concept. So, and through the KB4, we met some amazing beings that are combining this also with regeneration, which then I was able to really see that when we marry the aether and the earth, and combine it with creativity, we get sacred union of all these concepts, bringing healing, not just for our earth, but through healing our earth, we heal our human family. So we started with an amazing project with another KB4 fellow called Rich Brundell, who's got an organization called OICA. And so he uses a concept of taking an artist and immersing them in nature, and then allowing nature to inspire that artist to produce a piece of art, and then making an NFT of that whole process, and then using the sale of that NFT not only to go back to the artist, but also to go back to whatever of the regeneration projects that the organization wants to work with. So we've created on paper an amazing project called Coral, which uses the same concept. So we have a local sculptor on the island that will sit in nature, be inspired to make a sculpture. Oika will make an NFT of that process. We will then take that sculpture and drop it into the ocean, because there's been a massive port built about 20 kilometers away from Lamu Island, and that has destroyed large portions of the reef. And so we will then allow, or maybe even speed up, the coral regeneration. So coral likes to regenerate on rough cement, especially if there's lots of little holes and little spaces. And so then the idea would be that over time, as the coral regenerates, the NFT that's created around that sculpture goes up in price. And so the money that's generated through that allows us to work with other local sculptors and drop more sculptures into the ocean, which means that the local community that would have relied on the reefs to bring tourists out to the reefs, and now the reefs are dying, there would be an underwater sculpture gallery for tourists to come to. And so that increases income for local people, as well as tying in this idea of ether, earth, and art. And then we took that same concept and applied it to afforestation. So we have on the Gitcoin funding platform, we have a Gitcoin grant application for ether, earth, and art, which would do the same thing, but instead of an artist, a sculptor, we're working with a local musician, a Swahili musician. And so we will be asking that musician to go and sit in the dunes, how they are now, which is highly degraded, and create a piece of music inspired by the dunes now. And then we have a pilot project of how best we would be able to grow trees in that highly degraded and exposed situation on public land as a public good. Because if we don't really start planting trees now, what are we doing for our next generation? And as a mother of many, a lot of what I do is really looking at what are we leaving for the next generation. And so that is so instead of dropping sculptures in the ocean, we will use the same concept for doing a pilot project on what grows. It has to be salt tolerant, wind tolerant, drought tolerant. Is it best to grow them from seed? Is it best to grow them with seed balls? Is it best, to bring in the seedlings and plant already, 2-year-old seedlings? We need to learn how is best to do it rather than just what the government does every year is they just come and just plant thousands of trees and just leave them and go. And of course, the cows eat them all and they all die. So we really want to explore how better to do it, focusing on indigenous trees for the coastal region of Kenya, as well as some localized exotics that have been growing for hundreds of years in that region. And those also that have use for man, because obviously the dhows, the ancient boats, they're all wood, but those trees are harder and harder to find. So we would also try to grow the trees for the dhows and the trees for construction and the trees for charcoal that could be harvested and continued to be grown in a sustainable way for human consumption. So we also, of course, permaculture in and of itself is basically using these same concepts of divine masculine, divine feminine, although with different words, they wouldn't use them in that way. But if you want to say permaculture is based on study of nature, and the more we study nature, the less we do, the more we just sit in nature like right now and look at, how is nature actually dealing with this, what I would consider challenge, and then if I watch her long enough and she'll show me how to use her, if you want to say, or they, to find a solution. And so I didn't have to sit and work it all out myself. All I had to do is sit quietly in a garden or in a park or and contemplate and just allow her to show, like the ants can teach us, the birds can teach us, the forest systems, which is permaculture, is looked at how did the forests keep themselves in a sustainably for millions of years. What were their design concepts? Like, how did they do that? Because surely if we can work out their design concepts, then if we use those concepts for anything, any human endeavor, we must get sustainability. So of course, design concepts like recycling, forests recycle everything. There's 12 design concepts of the permaculture design principles. So as I say, like, constantly circular, nothing is wasted in a forest. Biodiversity, forests never plant one thing. Like, there's just so many diverse elements within it. Forests will use every available space. So you've got the tall trees, the smaller trees, the undergrowth, the vines, the clearings, those that can take, shade, those, there's, as I say, there's 12 of them. I won't go into it, but you can have a look. So that is a kind of I don't want to say a concept, but a way of looking at life that then I apply to all works, even raising my children and, everything if I can. I also, as you know, do every bi-monthly, I do the new moon and full moon focused intentions. So I do them on many different platforms. And that is my commitment to our human family, that through twice a year, through those focused intentions, which the realm of focused intentions uses the masculine and feminine concept, because we have an electric image that I help people to create, combined with a magnetic feeling. And so when we combine the electromagnetic, we create an irresistible attraction. And so I use that concept to bring us into an experience of all is one. So every 2 weeks, I will create a focused intention around commonality, around something that all of us at some stage in our life experience. And then we can, through that, realize that I'm not actually unique. I'm not actually like different than everyone. We're actually all one, and we all experience the same things throughout our lifetimes. We can't avoid them, if you want to say. And so, yeah, I also do a lot of divine feminine empowerment, if you want to say, because there is an unbalance, as I say, where the gifts of the masculine are somehow valued higher than the gifts of the feminine at this point. And so there is a bit of kind of restoration that needs to happen. So I do focus, both men and women, on pleasure and on finding your pleasure and on allowing pleasure to have a space in your life, because it tends to be that pleasure is something we do after work, but work is more important. And that actually the focus is on our divine masculine ability to get things done. And then pleasure is like an extra thing that we can do once we've got things done. But actually, if we put pleasure into our work is easy. And the more that we turn ourselves on, if you want to say, or light ourselves up, the more that we light up everyone around us, and the more that we allow everyone to be their shining, beautiful selves. And so we get turned on through adding pleasure into our lives. But so often we don't even know what we want. We don't even know what we desire. We don't even know what turns us on, because no one has ever really allowed us to focus or encouraged us to focus on those things. So I do quite a lot of that also. And yeah, I think I mean, there's lots and lots, but I won't keep going on.
I know you do so much, actually. Your story is epic. But actually, the question I did want to ask was like, I think to because I know we're going to be ending soon, and also open it up. If anyone else has any questions or thoughts, Maya, you actually shared something really beautiful about logic and intuition, and how, while maybe, a logical person is maybe someone that, like you said, has studied maths, good at science, but intuition is like a very complex form of logic in a way. I don't know if Maya, you wanted to share anything about that. You're welcome to.
Thank you. Yes, I think that there's this idea that intuition isn't logical, but I have realized over time that actually intuition is a kind of subconscious logic, and it brings together very quickly a lot of different factors that can't be consciously expressed. That doesn't mean that it's not valid. I think, though, the difficulty with intuition is understanding what those underlying subconscious factors might be, because not all of them may, for example, if we take into account some of the sort of fear created by mainstream media and things like that, that may contribute to the kind of network of information that comes to us as intuition. So it's quite helpful if we can unpick it a little bit. But it definitely is, it's a a bringing together very, very fast of lots of different factors, and therefore, you know, it should be valued massively.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think like what's interesting, I think what you say and what Sister you were kind of talking, and what we kind of, I think through this, like, you know, we talked about at the start, like when we use these words, you know, sometimes the language is quite, you know, it's hard to express, like you said, there isn't really, sometimes it's hard to express these concepts in the words that we have today. So yeah, like to your point, is that intuition such a form of logic, but yeah, we don't really know how to express it or really describe it, I guess, that it kind of becomes this feeling, an emotional thing, which is interesting. I don't know if anyone else has any questions, or Andy, if you had any thoughts or comments or questions. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you so much, Sister. It is such a privilege and a joy to know you and to get to share some of your story, truly. Thank you. You are incredible and inspiring as always. Thank you, Namala and Fang, for putting this on and for encouraging us to share further, because it is remarkable. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you. And thank you again, Sister. I think this has been really, really special. I think what would be nice is maybe, you know, as someone who might be new to these concepts, like, I think you mentioned a few things like the path of surrender, the path of the willing, or even like the, you know, pleasure. How do you think like someone who's new to these concepts can really approach this? Like, I know I'm really feeling it now at the end of the year. It's been a really hectic year. I was just telling Fang, I'm like so ready for a break. But I feel, you know, what you're saying about we really kind of overemphasize maybe this masculine traits. How do you, what would you say are some practical ways for someone to bring balance to their own life or their work, or connect with, you know, these different energies?
I mean, the key, because as I say, like, there's an emphasis on the doing rather than the being. So we're mostly human doings. We're not really human beings anymore. And so we kind of define ourselves by what we do in life. You know, I am a doctor. Really, are you a doctor? Is that who you are? You know, so we can really begin to look at, well, okay, that's what I do, but now who am I? Take some time to just sit and be, and it can be in a very uncomfortable space, and it's vulnerability and surrender which makes us feel really uncomfortable, because we're used to trying to direct life. And so part of it is just beginning to feel how that feels and admit to ourselves that it doesn't feel very, very comfortable, and just kind of increasing that time. You know, we might only be able to sit still for a minute or two a day or three. We might only be able to not focus on our computers, and I study under lots of amazing beings in this world, but one of them, Mama Gina, she has these great concepts of having dance breaks. So in between each meeting or each piece of work you do, you have 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes of your favorite song, and you turn off your camera and you put on your favorite song and you have a dance break, or you have something in your day, whatever it is that you love to do, and you just do it in small amounts. So what you're doing is just adding in little bits of your own pleasure, little bits of something just for you, if it's like a favorite cup of tea, but make it in a really ritual way. Like, ritual is another really good way for getting in touch with the divine feminine, because once we build a ritual, like our ritual for going to bed is usually like brushing teeth, turning off our phone, whatever, you know, like making our pillows in the right way. By the time we get to lie down, our body's already ready, because we've done these rituals for so many times that we're already halfway there before we're there. And so it's a bit like that. That's the power of ritual. So by keeping a daily ritual, we can begin to program our bodies to already be, you know, to already get there without, so over time it gets easier. But now, to keep a discipline of a daily practice, you're using your divine masculine. So that's where I say the two are so important. And so yes, as I say, you know, I find it really important to begin to write lists. What do I want in life? What do I still want to experience? Are there places in this world I still want to go? Are there foods I still want to eat? Are there life experiences I still want to have? Are there sexual experiences I still want to have? Like, if I had a magic wand, what would I want? And that begins to get us in touch with what our desires are, you know, and look for the big things as well as the small things. You know, spending time in nature, like just sitting under a tree, just sitting on, you know, anywhere. If you're in the city, then rooftop, park, you know, even if it's cold, even if it's anything. I also find movement, like going for walks, going for a run, especially if they can be outside. Listening to music that's not like, there's difference in the music. So the music that makes you think is already going to take you into your masculine. So listening to body music, or music that takes you into your body, focusing on your senses, like closing your eyes for a while and just listening or tasting, you know, like making sure that when you eat, you don't read anything, you don't be on your phone, you don't watch television, you don't, you focus on the smell of the food, the taste of the food.
Wow.
You know, anything embodied will bring you into your divine feminine. Just, you know, just closing your eyes is a really big one.
Thank you so much, sister, for sharing. I think we've officially run out of time.
I had
which is
some
like,
questions. I had some questions to ask about, because the whole thing was on what if. And so what if her existence was, and her gifts was valued, accepted and valued equally? Would that make a difference to how we treat those that appear in a feminine, in a woman's body in our world? Like, if the world accepted the divine feminine, would it change the way that we treat women? Would it change our approach to regen and regenerating our earth? Would it change how we treat Mother Nature? Would it change how we value the emotions and emotional intelligence? Would it change how we value those that are creating beauty in our world? You know, the artists. Would it change how we value intuition and inner knowing? Would it change how we value taking rests and naps and just saying, I can't come into work today, I need to go inside me and I'll be better tomorrow, I'll come in full of life tomorrow, and I'll, you know? Would it change how we value softness or vulnerability, of being open to people? Would it change how, you know, how we view submitting or surrendering, which actually is the biggest power we have, is being able to submit and surrender? Would it change our ability to receive? Would it change the way that we allow cosmic consciousness to lead our family? Would we seek more ways of collaboration and cooperation to find solutions to the challenges that we face as a family? Would we look for win-win situations? Would we value the caring professions more? Would we value the arts more? Would we value teaching more? You know, the questions kind of go on and on. How would we change our views around pleasure and desire? How would the language of our soul and our heart be allowed to be a compass? So those are what I would like everyone to go away with, the thoughts. And I did write a chapter in a book that was published recently about balancing the masculine and feminine in one body. My son, who's also KB4 fellow, CS Netter, tried to use a platform called Koji. It's the first time we've used it, so we did do it, and then I think it's now not quite working. If anyone is interested to read the chapter, what I'm asking is that, so we have a community-based organization in Lamu Island called Collective Sovereignty. It's through that organization that we're doing the regen work, as well as we have a big food sovereignty project where we're empowering everyone, if possible, on the island to start growing food, because the island doesn't produce its own food and all food has to be brought in with fossil fuels. So I'm asking if anyone is interested. We tried to link it that maybe you could give a donation to the CBO and then receive a copy of my chapter, which goes into all of these things in much greater detail. The only thing is that I'm not sure if it's all putting together and flowing. So I'm not quite sure what you advise, Fang, about that one.
I think I'm happy to kind of like share the link in the follow-up, and then whoever has kind of like donated, I'm also like happy for us to share the book with us, and then we can reshare it or and then take it from there.
Great, thank you so much, and we'll keep working on the Koji and try to work out where the problem was.
Yeah.